timetable because we know time is precious. We do thank you for coming. So without further ado, from Historic Evansville, Mr. Joseph Engler. Let's give him a hand, please.
Okay, everyone can hear me okay? Alright, can everyone see okay? That's the other tricky one. Don't hesitate to scoot up if it's too small for you. Hopefully with PowerPoint the words will be nice. But thank you guys for inviting me here. My name is Joe Engler. I run the Historic Evansville website. I got into the history of Evansville. We bought an old house and I kind of got into research of it. But beyond that, we started looking into, I would find all these old buildings in Evansville, some that I knew about, some I had no idea that were even there, and just trying to figure out when they were around, when they were built. And to me, it was like a big puzzle. I'm not a real big history guy, but I really found it with an engineering background, a web programming background. It's been fun to try and figure out all those old things. So, fairly broad knowledge, fairly knowledgeable about Evansville history in general. When you get in depth, sometimes I kind of lose some of it. But what I want to present to you guys is a little bit about Evansville around the time the church was built. Kind of give you a feeling for that area of town, or this area of town, I guess, right here. And actually, the second part of the program, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of St. Louis. So Evansville, they entered prosperity after the Gilded Age, after the Civil War and Reconstruction. People had money, so they were doing a lot of things. They were building, the size was growing. There was a tremendous growth in the population of Evansville and in the size. The city limits were roughly St. Joe on the west, Garvin Street on the east, and Morgan Avenue to the north, and of course it went all the way down to the river. About this time, streetcars started providing easy access around town. The suburbs were expanding rapidly. The dirt roads, the first paved roads were in 1889. This photo here shows Main Street with dirt. It's kind of a neat photo. That building actually on the corner there is still standing. It was a farmer's daughter for a long time, and I think now it's just an empty building, but the old Washington Hotel. Electricity and telephone were becoming more prevalent. Still a lot of houses used gas. Telephone was actually a subscription service at the beginning, so there weren't a whole lot of members on that. But a lot of these modern conveniences we think of are just now starting to come into play. Some of the civic buildings, the old courthouse downtown, was under construction. There was actually an older one on Main and 3rd Street, the corner of Main and 3rd. The City Hall was there. Does anybody recall the City Hall building downtown? On 3rd and Walnut. Really neat photos. And a lot of this stuff, if you don't know or if you're thinking of it and you want to see an old photo of it, if you go to the website, when you get a chance, you can just type in City Hall and it'll pull up photos of it. But the post office was there too on 2nd Street. It was actually still being used as the post office at that time. Railroads were starting to kind of lay their mark on Evansville. They kind of, with us being tied into the railroad system, it really helped Evansville stay a legitimate city. A lot of them that didn't get a railroad kind of died off. The Evansville and Terre Haute Railroad, later the Central and Eastern Illinois, they had a station on 8th Street, the old, the USO house, and I think it was a community center for a while. That's the 4 columns, that the freight station, the passenger depot. They'd use those pillars in the 4 columns. The 4 Freedoms Monument downtown, sorry. The Peoria, Decatur, and Illinois Railroad, later the Illinois Central. That's just not far from here on Franklin Street, near the Tin Man Brewery, actually. There's an old depot that's there. The Louisville and Nashville Railroad, they built the Henderson Bridge in 1885. That was actually one of the first bridges that spanned the Ohio River, I think between Louisville and St. Louis. But they actually kind of helped establish the town of Howe on the west side. And then the Evansville Belt Road, it was a road that looped around. It kind of went along Morgan Avenue and kind of made a circle around the city. There were 5 daily newspapers. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but there's 5 daily newspapers. Corner saloons and grocery stores were very common. They were on almost every city block that anchored them. Around here, I believe, if anybody recalls, the Zunkel Grocery some cool, I think there's a meat market too on Delaware. Farther up there was a confectionery on the corner of, yeah, you probably heard of it. There's a groceries down here. I think Ising Drugstore was nearby on Reed Street. But at this time, and some of these I might not have updated because I did this for 1888, there's about 40 churches at that time of several denominations. And just to kind of show you how the times were, the schools are still separated by color. They had schools and they had colored schools. Some of the big players in town, I won't list all of these, but this kind of gives you an idea of the bigger companies that were around at that time. Some of these you probably will recall. Heilman, Mesker, there's a couple of Mesker buildings we'll talk about. Some of the breweries around town. The furniture store, somebody mentioned that there's a Shalaski in the church still. There's a Shalaski family. Hey, got it. The old table manufacturer nearby. The banks, Old National Bank, Citizens National Banks, now Fifth Third. National City Banks Integra, they're gone. Some of the newspaper, the Democrat, the German newspaper. Some of the other ones, Lensing Wholesale, Strauss and Brothers, Botticher Kellogg. A lot of recognizable names, even still. Lamasco on the north side. A lot of you guys probably have heard of Lamasco. We're actually doing a walking tour of Lamasco if you guys are interested. I'll talk about that later. But, it was a separate town established in 1836, and the definition is kind of wrong, but it was technically from First Avenue, that was the first street, all the way west to St. Joe. And then it kind of went north from the river. But the streets there were on the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, as opposed to downtown, you had them all at the angle, right where facing where the riverfront was. So you got all those crazy intersections with downtown hanging in the water. They were literally two separate towns, and they kind of blended in together. At this time, they had the growing north side of town. Baker School, I'll show you a little bit about that later. It was built in 1871, 1872, served the area. There's a fire station number 10, not too far from here on Columbia Street. It was built in 1889. We got fire protection around here. And actually, I think fire station number 4 relocated from downtown to closer by to kind of help serve the residential area. Deaconess Hospital began an old house on Iowa and Marion Street. And Gordon was telling me that the synod that helped establish the church was very active in doing deaconess hospitals all across the country, and that St. Luke's was involved very much with getting the one established here. Garvin's Grove, you might recall as Garvin's Park. It was actually property that he owned, and he let people kind of walk around it, traipse around there, and it became an official city park like around 1950. North Main, it was kind of a natural extension of Main Street. I know if you actually follow the line, it kind of, Main Street lines up actually with Stringtown. There's some of the old maps show that it actually connected. I'm not sure if I can ever prove that, but what they kind of did then is North Street curved and met up with the north and south streets of Lamasco. And then that area was kind of plotted as Sullivan's Town. I found a little bit of references to this area called Sullivan's Town. Some of the streets were named a little differently, but that was like Barker Avenue West. And the growth obviously centered around Main Street. But they kind of filled in between Lamasco and that area, this area of Sullivan's Town. And I don't know if you guys ever noticed, especially on like some of the streets, I think Illinois is one, there's a significant jog where the streets are off by like maybe 10, 20 feet when you're driving. You don't really notice when you're driving because it kind of just veers, but if you ever get a chance to look, the buildings really do misalign, and that's because they were literally separate areas that kind of ended up merging together. There was a streetcar service that went up North Main Street, and that helped foster a lot of the growth. North Main was more of a business corridor. There's a lot of shops and stores there, and the manufacturing was more situated along the railroads, along Division Street, and I had mentioned too along the Belt Road, kind of closer to like First Avenue, where it crosses up there, close to Garvin Park. There was also a Northside Businessmen Association. I don't know how involved they got or how long they lasted, but I found some references to them in 1912. So, I mean, there was an identifiable north side. There was Lamasco, there was downtown. It wasn't it may have been vague where they defined it, but the north side was, there's some shops. There's a north side bank. There's a couple things that were literally north side. I think that's kind of gone out of favor now that the north side is farther north. This one you might find interesting. I'll let down for some of these people. We'll talk about most of these that are listed here in a second, but I just kind of want to give you a reference for the map. This is Main Street in 1880. There's an 1880 aerial map, and it's got a bunch of, it's kind of like what you would see in a social studies book. It has really good detail on a lot of these little things, but they kind of give you a reference to where you are. The Evansville Foundry, I don't know if anybody recognizes that. That's on Division Street. And again, we'll talk about these here in a minute, just to get your bearings. There's Baker School, right there. The Sir Heinrich Flour Mills on Main Street. Again, I'll describe these in a little bit, but just kind of want to put some location for you. This is the Settled Brickyard. Found a reference to it. That's where St. Lucas is now. It was an old brickyard that they bought and turned into it. And then here's a couple old churches in the vicinity. The First German Reformed Church over there on Elsa Street. It's on the far right. It would actually kind of end up rolling into the evangelical church as part of the same organization now, the same denomination. And then on the left, the bottom left, you'll see Holy Innocents Episcopal and Salem Evangelical Church. And I'll talk about that later too. So here's North Main in 1889. If you could look real quick, you see there's quite a bit of difference between the growth here. I know the map's fairly rough, but you can see all the bare spots, even like northeast of Main Street. And then here it's starting to fill in quite a bit. So I've got the five we just talked about: the foundry, the school, the brickyard, the church. And this is from an 1888 map. So then this one came in, the Blunt Plow. That was there until actually fairly recently. The Evansville Coffin Company. The Evansville Electric Light Company that rolled into Sigico and the Vectron. The Hermann Brothers Manufacturing, I think it was Help and Company. The Ohio Valley, hang on this one there, that's actually another church. Oh, that is St. Paul, isn't it? It was their older church. And then there is the Ohio Valley Planing Mill. And then there's the Main Street traction line. You can see the red dots kind of show you where the streetcar went up the area, service the area. And then now we'll talk about a lot of those buildings. So if you didn't recognize them, hopefully you will now. The Evansville Foundry Association. It was built in 1873 at Reed and Division Street. It later was turned into the Advanced Stove Works. They built a new office and assembling plant around there. A lot of those buildings are still standing. Here's the offices on Reed Street. Everybody recognize that one? And Bethel Brothers has been there since about 1960. There's also the warehouse on Division Street. I think it's a bed mattress factory now. That was part of the Evansville Foundry too. Baker Avenue School, they might go to Baker? Just out of curiosity. Yeah. Okay. So Baker Avenue was built in 1871 for the North Main area. It was the fifth in the city. The older schools were Wheeler School, Carpenter School, 9th Street School, which was Chestnut Walnut School, and Fulton Avenue School. And then obviously the high school didn't count, it wasn't an elementary school. But so this was the fifth school in the city. And when you kind of when you plot them out on a map, you can see where it really kind of spreads out around town. So this is the natural progression on the north side here. It had several additions. School number 2 in the late 1880s, the second building. A third school they called Virginia Street School, because it was on Virginia Street. 1890s. And then the gym and the auditorium was added in 1922. The school closed in 1973 as part of the desegregation effort. They closed a lot of the neighborhood schools at that time. The school was kind of interesting. Some doctors bought it. They were trying to turn it into a medical facility. And even after they tore it down in 76, they were trying to build a nursing home on this lot. But you guys know, it was the McDonald's Hopeland Workshop. They built it in 1980. And as you know, it's Sorka, where we are now. So it was an old school here, if you guys didn't know. But again, here's some of the pictures. There's at the front, you can see the two buildings. This is looking pretty much from the church, like looking this way. So that's what you used to see coming out of church on Sundays. The Evansville Roller Flour Mill. It was the Acer Heinrich and Company flour mill. It was built in 1880. This is on the corner of Michigan, I think. Yeah, Michigan. In 1891, it became the Evansville Roller Flour Milling Company, and later was the Aiken Erskine Milling Company, and then they ended up moving towards the manufacturing district. And then it was torn down in around 1910 for the Walsh Baking Company. I don't know if anyone recalls that place. I can't remember what they were in more recent history, but they tore it down, and that's where the Taroni's parking lot is. So, lots of parking around here. The Blunt Plow. In 1881, they built the Blunt Plow. It relocated from downtown. They built this huge thing. It pretty much covered the whole block. There's a shot of it on the top from 1895. And I was kind of wondering if one of the church towers in the background would have been St. Lucas. I didn't quite figure it out. Sometimes those sketches were pretty liberal. They would just kind of put things that make it look like a city, so they're not always to scale. It was later renamed the Birch Plow around 1950, and then it moved out to the US 41 up kind of where the airport in the 60s, and then it was torn down in 1970. That's where IGA is now. Yeah, that's where the IGA is now. The Evansville Coffin Company, this one always kind of interested me. It was incorporated in 1881. It was on the corner of, let's see here. I think it was on Michigan too. Oh no, it's in Michigan. It was manufactured wood burial cases and caskets, and it was a dealer in undertaker supplies. It was officially renamed the Evansville Casket Company in the 30s, and it was torn down around 1953. I think they actually relocated to another city out of town. And then they put the National City Bank there, Integra. And I don't know if it's the same bank as they built when it was in 1953, but that was actually touting it as the first drive-in bank in Evansville on the north side. But as I said, Integra, that's more parking for trains. But there's the old picture of it with the horse and the postcard at right. And one of the pictures I had earlier had a shot down Main Street of it, and this was in the background. Johann and Sons, they were a funeral home established by Albert Johann in the 1880s. They were at the corner of Garfield and Indiana. Again, oh, I could be wrong, sorry. I'm not gonna, I'll admit that I may be pronouncing it incorrectly. But someone says Johann. So. But either way, they're at the corner of Garfield and Indiana. They built a new chapel in the rear in the 1930s. If you go by there, it's still standing. It was forced closed in 1979 because apparently nobody at the place had a valid funeral license. So now it's apartments, but the building's still there. Oh, and I'm sorry to read this here. The one above is an old ad, and it says funeral directors and embalmers, and it says hacks for funerals and weddings. Take your business there, I guess. Herman Brothers, the manufacturers of wagon and farm machinery. I think this was a corner of Illinois. They were built in 1886, corner of Illinois. In 1886, it became Help Brothers, and they made an addition around 1915. And I think even later it was Help Monroe Hardware. And it was torn down in 1990 for Vectron. That's a cool building. And these solid brick, I mean, I guess my interest in a lot of this is more as a lot of times as a preservationist. So when they tear down these solid old buildings, it's pointless sometimes. Okay, I won't get on my soapbox here. But the mechanics planing mill, this was on a main Iowa Street. It was the Ohio Valley Planing Mill in 1887. They built after a fire torched their old building. I think it was on Walnut Street. It became the Mechanics Planing Mill in 1893 and was later the A1 Building Company. And it was the Cash and Carry Furniture Company when it had a big fire in 1948. You can see it there. Yeah, it was gone. So that's actually where the Gelhausen paint is. I don't know if Gelhausen has been in this whole time, but the store that's there was Gelhausen. Actually, when they rebuilt Cash and Carry Furniture. Actually, was the building that rebuilt it. And then right now, that's where the Gelhausen paint is. Some other North Main Street stores you might recognize. Let's see. The first one in the upper right, upper left, 422 North Main Street. It's on the corner there. It's been a I can't remember what it was originally, but it was an antique store for a while, and it was just recently Penny Lane Coffee, and now it's another supply place. It's all painted orange now. The next one was, and it was built in 1884. The next one over is the Bauer Building in 1877. 1897, sorry, my handwriting's up. It was built in 1897. It's a Mesker building. Does anybody know what those are? Mesker buildings. Mesker Iron downtown. They would build these store facades, and they would build the store, and then they'd slap the front on, and it looked really fancy, kind of like the Gerst House downtown, or sorry, on the west side. Just kind of a nice molding, and then they would paint it really fancy. But there's a few iconic ones still around. This one is one of them. And it was actually Taroni's for a while before Taroni's moved across the street. And it was most recently the police west sector station. Now it's the Jacobsville joint in. The next one over is the Schmidt Grocery on the far right. It was built around 1882, and I think it was a grocery there for a long time. And more recently, I think it's been a tavern. Below that is 523 Main Street, also known as Lucky Lady. It's actually another Mesker building too. You can tell it. You can kind of see they got the decorative iron uprights. Like I said, if you go by there, you sure to check it out. There's a lot of neat detail to it. Despite that. And then to the left here are the J Sales Company buildings. I think the J Sales been there a while, and that one was the Zunkel. What was his name? Engelhart. I thought that was awesome. Engelhart's Zunkel. But those are there, right? And I think the picture's a little dark to see the church is right behind there. Other growth in the North Main area around this time, St. Paul Lutheran, I think I showed you guys on the picture. It's an older church, but the building itself is newer. They rebuilt it in 1907. The one I didn't know about it because it's kind of off the Main Street, Park Memorial Presbyterian. It's kind of tucked back there on Elsis and Delaware. Just one block up the Columbia. Hose House number 10, there's a good picture of it. Fire station, 1889. It's actually, I think, the oldest fire station building at this point. In 416 North Main, that's another one. It's kind of between Taroni's and the one we talked about earlier. It was built around 1890. Deaconess Hospital, 1892. It was an old house. They expanded from that. I think actually at one point they moved the old house in the back of the lot and built the new hospital, and has since been expanding that. Some of you may recall too, I think in the 70s they tore down the original, not the original, but the oldest part of the building. So now I think the oldest part is just one of the old entrances. So, Hose House number 4, that was built in 1897. It relocated from a small building downtown. And I don't know if anybody remembers, there's actually an alarm station that they built behind it in 1914, and that's still there. They're restoring that. I think it's going to be an architectural salvage place. So hopefully that'll be nice. And then 40 West Iowa Street, I don't know if you guys recall it. It was right behind the church. A really neat building. It had a turret on it. I think it was white, and they tore it down probably last year. I can't say it was nice when they tore it down, but it was neat looking. And then Shirley Todd, Naughty Pine. That was built around 1900. The Taroni's building, it was originally Bossy Brothers, like a grocery. It was around 1900 also. And then Evansville Plating Works. It was built around that time too. There's a good picture of Park Memorial. Let's see. Newer North Main, I was trying to think of a title for this, and that was the best thing to come up with, because, I mean, they are newer buildings, but they're not as old as some of the other ones. But I think this I didn't have this slide in there, and I think a lot of people that are members here that remember the history here will remember these buildings more than some of those older ones. Stinson Brothers, Gecky's Department Store. All right. The Northside Bank, that's the one I was talking about. I think they actually had a theater there for a while. It was built in 1912. It's now an old national branch. The Farmer's Dairy, it was built in 1921, and it must have been so prosperous they actually added a second story almost 2 years later. And it was later cooked dairy. I don't know what's in there now. The OK Bakery, does anyone recall that building? I think it was like a beauty warehouse or something. What does it say? Nyla's Cosmetics Salon. Yeah. So it was torn down, I think, I made a note of it, 1970. The Handy Furniture, if you actually look, you can still see it on the paint where it said Handy Furniture. It was later Holland-born. It was built in 1923. And then Grueson's on it's now North Main Hall. That was 1938. It's got kind of an Art Deco front. You can definitely tell it's a little newer. But I mean, these are kind of the buildings I think identified North Main Street. And then I thought this was kind of neat. Here's a parade on North Main. It's crossing Virginia Street in 1947. Looks too warm to be like a Christmas place. I wasn't sure. Yeah, it says Hesmer's. I don't know if that was just an advertisement or if that was actually Hesmer's.
No, it's Athens.
Was it?
Yeah, that's Athens right above.
Oh, I see. Okay. Atherton. Okay. There you go. But yeah, that was another mean brick building that's gone now. This is actually where the subway is, I think. Yeah. So. And the neighborhood today, at the time, I think now you're seeing a little bit different, but it really got bisected when the Civic Center was built. I mean, it kind of severed a major artery. People used to tell me how they used to cruise up and down Main Street. Obviously, it took away half of it. The Baker School was a victim of neighborhood school closures. I think Delaware, a lot of this area is served by Delaware School now. Deaconess Hospital, as good as it serves, a lot of the expansions has taken over a lot of the residential area to the west. So almost immediately here, there's not a whole lot of houses. And just kind of put a caveat, Jacobsville was originally concentrated around northeast of 1st Avenue and Columbia Street. There was a lady, Hannah Jacobs, and that was an area she platted. But now it's been kind of expanded, pretty much synonymous with North Main. So, and then the other thing too, Blunt Plow, Advanced Stoveworks, Evansville Plating, and Kelsey, I don't remember, it was them. They made what do you call it, Hanes, like horse manufacturing, like for horse collars. They were one of the main offenders for the EPA cleanup, all the plating that they did on their metals. Helped the area grow, but in some ways, it's kind of paying for it now. So I thought it was kind of interesting. So hopefully that puts a little perspective on the neighborhood and what it is. And then again, I'll go into the history of St. Lucas. I did a presentation similar for this to St. Anthony's, where I go, St. Anthony's Catholic, and I didn't get much of the history. So again, I think having an outsider do the history is kind of neat because I'm a little less biased, but sometimes, if it's not accurate, landlord. Okay, so the Evangelical Church. Gordon and I were talking about this. We're not sure. St. John's and Zion. St. John's Evangelical downtown. A lot of these now are UCC churches. St. John's downtown and Zion downtown are right next to each other. Even for back then, that's pretty close. So we weren't 100% sure if one of them was considered the same or if there was like a different sect. But from what I can tell from some of the stuff I found, that was the first one. Zion was the second one. St. Lucas was the third. He's seen some references where it mentions it as the second oldest. So St. Paul's on the west side, I think it's on Michigan, kind of close by Franklin Street. It was in 1896, established in 1896, but it was actually a Reformed church in 1891, and then it kind of closed and later was used at Evangelical. Bethel Evangelical down on the east side, near Washington Street. I think it was actually on Jefferson in Garvin. Yeah, it was the English one. It was. I felt silly saying English since all the others were German. It would have been silly to put asterisks or German on all the other ones. But, and then St. Matthew's was established in 1914 out on First Avenue. But and I think St. Bethel, I think, was St. John's extension, and St. Matthew was formed by Zion. So again, I don't know 100% if they're all evangelical, but there definitely was. They were working. Can you answer this? Please. Yes, thank you. I've been fighting this.
Because the Zion folks are, I mean, just in case you ever do this again.
Right.
Zion is the mother church.
Okay.
She's 1 year older than, listen to that feminist talk. She is 1 year older than St. John.
1940, no, she wasn't.
It could be.
No, St. John's is an independent evangelical church. It's not
We have a little,
St. John's is independent, and it is independent until 1917, when Pastor Dressel is told that, or the pastor of the church is told that they won't be able to get past the Eden and unless they become part of the evangelical church.
We got a big banner at Zion we're gonna have to redesign.
Yeah, so it definitely was worth figuring out, but, you know, the point being, there was even another evangelical church, for me being, like I said, a Catholic, not understanding it. The Salem Evangelical, I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound condescending. Salem Evangelical was part of the Evangelical Association, which is different. And then I think there was a Linwood Evangelical that was tied in with that, and then the St. James Evangelical. So they were separate evangelicals. So from what I can find, I found an article where they mentioned that St. Matthew's was a 6, and when I did my math, it was number 6. So that's kind of where I went with. So but I would love to, honestly, I would love to figure this out or get clarity on it. St. Lucas Evangelical. Some of these are back here. Some of these old photos and articles. So and I'll make, if anybody's interested, I'll make these slideshow available to you guys later. But for the photos. But it was organized in July 21st, 1889 as a mission of Zion. It had 21 charter members. It was German speaking. They purchased the lots at the northeast corner of Barker in Virginia. Baker, I'm sorry. Baker, I got it written right. And unlike many of the churches, they actually built right away. A lot of them, like we talked about St. Paul's Lutheran, you know, even St. Anthony's, they would build smaller churches once they got established, they would go. So I think St. Lucas must have had everything or hit the ground running because they built a pretty nice church right off the bat. And this was actually a sketch from the 1889 article talking about it. So they kept pretty close to the design. The cornerstone was laid August 13th, 1889. And then here's an article from it. Cornerstone laying, St. Luke's Evangelical Church to enjoy the honor today. Elegant new house of worship, dedication to the edifice of today's program. But I thought it was kind of neat because, you know, when I'm looking for a lot of these things, I have to look up St. Luke, St. Lucas. You know, there's a lot of spellings. And I think we were talking to some of it's just how the English people would spell it versus the German people in there. But the church was designed by a famous architect, F.J. Schlatter, and I forgot to make notes of other buildings he's done in town. But, if you do much research, you find his name a lot. He's done a lot of fancy buildings. It was done in the Gothic style. It had the brick stone with the trims. Some of the reports vary, but it said it cost around $12,000 to build. I've seen somewhere it was even more like $9,000, $9,500. But it was dedicated April 20th, 1890. So,
You could buy the bricks for the tower.
yeah. So the founders. So sorry, a couple other things to note too. The church bell was added in 1892. There was a chapel, they call it Confirmation Hall, that was built actually behind the church. It was a separate building, a frame structure that was built at the same year. And then in 1893, they had a pipe organ. I don't think it's the same one that's there now, and an orchestra in 1895, which, from what I've heard, is the oldest continuous orchestra running. I don't know if it's evangelical or if it's just anything. And then the English services were offered in 1897. And like I said, you kind of saw the trend. A lot of the initial people that came here were speaking German. English became more popular. Same with even like St. Anthony's, where we really started integrating that stuff. And you could see by the Bethel Evangelical that it was completely in English. The first church council, when we doing some research, a lot of times when you see these founders or the people that are major players in the churches, they're really a who's who of some of these. And I was impressed too. Adolf Gaeke, I was right, okay. Senior, he was Gaeke and Sons Flour Grain. Henry Hoagie? I'll get this. He was a Blainte and Hoagie Brickyard. Wedeking Avenue, there was a Wedeking Brickyard. Louis Puster, he was a furniture guy, actually where the homeless shelter is now, downtown. That was his furniture factory. And Carl Hessenden, he had a brickyard too. So 3 out of the 6 founders, like not founders, but the church council were brickmen. So it makes sense that it had a nice brick church. You got a good discount, I guess. The parsonage, I hadn't seen a picture of this, so when I met with the members here, they shared some of the anniversary books that had some of these neat photos. Here's a picture of the parsonage. It was dedicated June 16th, 1895. It cost about $3,500 to build. It was brick with a porch, and then it was torn down. The educational wing was added in the 1960s. I think in its last few years, it kind of served as some extra outbuildings for like the choir and the Sunday school and stuff. Lucas Hall, catty corner from the church. They felt like they needed a Sunday school hall for the growing parish. It was pushed by the English members, and I think you said it was an English group, not like just English members. It was like the English Sunday League or something.
Sunday evening.
Okay, so there was a push for it. In 1907, they hired another famous architect, Harrison Shotwell. They actually designed the house that I live in, so I'd heard of them. They did Oak Hill Cemetery building. They did the court building downtown. That was the old furniture exchange. Again, when you start seeing some of these architects, you know, they're good architects, and I think a lot of some of the buildings are still there. This one cost $23,000. It was to build. This actually was kind of this was a architectural drawing of it from it was in the paper, but it was Harrison Shotwell's architectural drawing, so it had the floor plan and everything in it. It was pretty neat. But it was dedicated October 27th. They commonly called it Lucas Hall. And from what I understood from the onset, it was a pretty bustling place. They had events, plays, lectures in English and in German. They did concerts here. Served them all for several years. And then, we'll get into a little bit of this later, but the hall was remodeled and enlarged in 1939 for approximately $40,000. So the addition already has cost them more than the original building. And I've heard his name before, but I don't know. Eli Stengel, he was another architect. He did more recent buildings, like I said, 1939. It was dedicated January 7th, 1940, and it's now the Lucas Place Mission. So they converted into apartments, and I was told that it was designed in such a way that they could strip it all out and convert it back into an auditorium if they needed to. That was kind of neat. But this is a neat shot of it, like in the 30s, I think. I guess it'd be the 40s with the snow. St. Lucas, this is kind of a shot of the church in 1914. It was from the 25th anniversary book, but you can see the interior from the pictures I've seen. I haven't been in there yet, but it looks fairly similar now. And then to the left, there's the exterior of the church. And I was told that, I don't know, is this on the Virginia Street? Made a note. The Virginia Street was in German. The sign on the stone and the transom stained glass was in German. And on the Baker Avenue side, it's in English. That's kind of cool. This is kind of a neat shot. These are the Sanborn maps. They were insurance maps that really had elaborate detail on the buildings and the structures. So here you got to kind of feel for what you're looking at. Above is the red is brick. So you got the church and the rectory next to it. Catty corner is the church, and then you can see the one building on the Barker Avenue School. Baker Avenue School, sorry. I live on Broadway, so I was across Broadway. I know it, but I'm saying it wrong. And then one other thing to note too, you can't really make it out, but the church was actually addressed 1100 East Virginia Street, and that's because they used to index everything off of Fulton Avenue. Once they switched in like 1929, it was off of Main Street, so now it's, 39 West Virginia? 33 West Virginia. I think that's a record address, 33. This is another neat one I took from the 25th anniversary book. It's a picture of the orchestra in 1914, and to the left, the officers and the teachers of the Sunday school. And as you guys can probably still see, the St. Lucas Hall is spelled with an E, and I don't know if it's German, Paula, so that was kind of neat. So turning 50 over the next 25 years, kind of working up to their 50th anniversary. Some of the notable things is it was kind of neat. They mentioned that the 1950 basketball team won the YMCA championship, and the church league, and I think they were a pretty dominant team for the rest of several years. It sounded like. In 1918, they suspended German services for a while, but I think they had them back at the time. In 1934, the Evangelical Church merges with the Reformed Church, officially St. Lucas Evangelical Reformed. That's when they changed the name. One of the things I kind of forgot to mention earlier, we're talking about the old churches. On the map it had on Elsa's Avenue, there was a German Reformed church, and it was one of the few Reformed churches in town, but it fell apart in 1903, so there really was nothing to merge with at the time. I think a lot of them rolled into St. Lucas Church. But what was neat about that, it was actually an older church from the 1860s that was established downtown by the old Central High School. And then they moved out to Elsa's Avenue, I think around the turn of the century. Well, 1870s. So in 1935, a one-story office north of the church was erected. They tore down the old chapel, and they added an addition to the back of it. But it really blends seamlessly. Like I know when I was looking, I couldn't hardly tell the new from the old, the newer from the older. But it was dedicated in September 29, 1935. The 1937 flood is kind of interesting. They closed the church for a while. I think it was actually a citywide mandate. It wasn't anything that they could help. But they did hold military-only service, it mentioned in one of the old documents. And I know that the Indiana Naval Militia was quartered in the parish house for a while. And I thought this was kind of interesting. Temporary outhouses, and that's right in front of the hall there. So anybody that was around during the flood can imagine. And then above was a shot of one of the older basketball teams. Here's a good shot from the newspaper, a clipping from when they planned on adding the parish hall. The shaded building to the left is the proposed addition. And then the bargain at $40,000. No date for construction set. I can't remember. This is the 39th, and I think they built it within a year or something. These are kind of neat. Again, if you get a chance to get a hold of this, you might be able to see a little more detail. Above, I thought this was a really cool picture of Family Day in 1939. You can see they're kind of all out in front of the church. It's a panoramic. There's a church, and then there's a rectory, and some of the older houses that used to be there. Here's a confirmation class from 1946. I also had an older one from like 1908, but I didn't get a chance to put it in there. And these are neat. There's the aerial shots that I can get my hand on. If they're really good detail, you could zoom in and find a lot. So this actually was of the North Main area, but because it was such good detail, I could zoom in pretty well and you could see the church. So here you've got the church with the tower. There's the rectory, I'm guessing it was still there at the time. There's the Barker Avenue schools. The hall you can't see, Baker Avenue schools. Here's that old building that was just torn down. Okay, and then the final expansion, one of the last pushes that happened at the church, they remodeled the sanctuary in 1956. I think they added a cry room and a couple other things. I guess I don't quote me on that, but I know they did some modifications there. Another merger, it became UCC United Church of Christ when the Evangelical and Reformed merged with, I think, the Congregational Church in 1957. In 1959, they had a parsonage on Gum Street on the far east side. They bought that, and that's when they kind of phased out the rectory, the parsonage here. But then they did later sell that off. So it was actually an old house. It wasn't one that they built, but they sold that off. The house is on the northwest corner. Where we at? House on the northwest corner. They had student ministers were housed there for a while. I think the church later bought them, torn down, and put their parking lot there. And then I kind of grouped these together, so they might not all be at the same time frame, but in the 60s, they tore down the parsonage. They built a side entrance on this, kind of on the right-hand side. And then they did the educational administration wing in 1968. And that's pretty much how it looks today, I think. Here's a neat shot of the general contractors that built it. Here's a shot of it after they had completed it, kind of bragging about their work. That's kind of neat. So 1968. And again, if I'm being too terse here or too simplified here, forgive me, but one thing that I've, as an outsider, kind of observed, there seems, from what I've heard, there's been a renewed focus on the neighborhood. Some of the activities they do now, they kind of, for a while, I think, stepped away from that. Now they're really returning. Some of their ministries include the Potter Shop, which I think was a Hispanic parish user church. They do a community breakfast. Cage, St. Anthony's involved with this. I'm a really big one on this. I forget the first one. Okay. Congregations acting for justice and equality. Empowerment. I'm close. Sorry, but I like the idea behind it. There's a bunch of parishes around town that are all on board on this. Churches embracing offenders. That's a really neat concept. Saws. I don't know what that is. Sorry.
Servants at work.
Okay, I like it. And then in Lucas Place 2, they built another one a little farther over that's now a complex for a homeless veteran. And that's, like I said, to me that's neat. And like you said, 125 years is no small feat. So, happy 125th birthday, St. Lucas.
Well, thank you. That's a lot of stuff. A lot of information. And I'm sure you all enjoyed seeing pictures of businesses and, of course, St. Lucas as it has grown over the years. So thank you very much, Joe. We appreciate it very much. Check out the website, Historic Evansville, and you'll find a lot of information about all of Evansville. Good pictures and good research. There is